Wouldn't going back to the gold standard and revaluation of gold's value give the United States an opportunity to take advantage of the money reset with all their reserves? Right now, as we speak, I don't know. I don't know that would be an advantage. Long term, I agree. But also long term, I don't know that, and I know that the gold people are going to freak out, but it's just, sorry guys, got to be honest. I don't know that it's realistic for the global reserve currency to be backed by gold or Bitcoin or anything. Maybe that's tough though, because see, you've got to, when you have the global currency, reserve currency, that's accounts for 60-70% of settlement for global transactions, even outside of commodities, you have to have a very fluid money supply. This has been the case since the 1950s when the euro dollar system was set up. It was outside of the purview of all the central planners and the central banks. They could create as many dollars as they wanted to. It was, as Snyder always reminds us, it's a reserveless system. Bank reserves, not needed. It's a cashless system. Green pieces of paper, not needed. This is even during the gold standard. So the ideal, in my opinion, is when you have, how should I say this? The ideal is when you can have the money supply expand at the same rate as productivity. So what do I mean by that? Let's say that you're a bank in the Eurodollar system, or even here in the United States, and let's say that you've got two businesses that, let's say these water bottles, right? So these water bottles are two businesses, and they go to the bank, and the bank says, they do their pitch, and they've got fantastic ideas, and they've got a fantastic model, or maybe they've already got a business that's cash flow positive, and they just need a loan to get some more manufacturing, some machines to build more widgets. And the bank says, oh my gosh, both these are no brainer. They're going to create a lot of goods and services. This is going to benefit the economy. They're going to be able to easily pay us back. They've got tremendous collateral, and look at their balance sheet, how amazing it is. So the bank is going to go ahead and extend both of those businesses loans if there's no constraints. Now, when they're creating those loans, they're creating additional currency units, right? They're creating quote unquote money. They're creating dollars that didn't exist before, even if the base layer is gold or Bitcoin. Now, there's one wing of the Austrian economists that say, no, we want full reserve banking. And this is usually like the Bitcoin maxis. They would fall into that category. They do not want fractional reserve banking. And so in my example right here, you would maximize productivity, because there wouldn't be a limit on the commercial banks' ability to create currency units. The catch here is you can't bail people out. So if you bail people out, then the banks start creating currency units for consumption, not production. That's the problem. Or then they start creating currency units just to financialize the economy, to create derivatives contracts, or whatever it may be. So the next thing you know, we wake up and we've got 4 quadrillion worth of derivatives. Well, that one of the main reasons is because all these central banks come in and they backstop the whole system. So these banks are like, why shouldn't we create new currency units for everything? Not just productivity, for consumption and this and derivatives and financializing everything and taking risk. And then the Fed drops rates down to 0%. So it forces them to take more risk just to get a return. And the next thing you know, you have this whole convoluted cluster F of a system. But if you go back to the 1800s, we had fractional reserve banking. That was not a top-down thing from the government. That was bottoms up. That was a result of free market capitalism. But we allowed the banks to go bust. And yes, a lot of them did go bust. And it created cycles. But we had deflation of 50% from 1800 all the way to 1900. 100 years where prices went down by 50% while we had fractional reserve banking, the base layer gold. And the banks actually issued their own currencies, but it's just the government was out of it. We didn't have a central bank, with the exception of the early 1800s there. So this is, I think, a superior, well, I shouldn't say superior. That makes it sound like it's almost perfect. This is the best bad system we as human beings can create, in my opinion. So now, if you go ahead and you back that entire system to where, now I think if it's redeemable in gold, that's fine. But as far as having a reserve requirement for the banks and everything, just let the free market decide. If you want, if the public, the general public wants banks that have a higher reserve requirement, great. They'll just move all their money over there, their Bitcoin or their gold or silver or whatever, right? So just look at what's happening right now with social media. Look at what's happening with Twitter. Look at what's happening with Rumble. I mean, 2 years ago, everyone thought that we were just completely doomed, that we were going to just be beholden to these central planners that run these social media companies. But then the free market comes in and people start getting pissed. Elon Musk gets pissed enough to where he's like 44 billion. Sure, here you go. I'll buy Twitter and F all of you, right? That's free market capitalism. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not perfect. It's messy, but it works. And I think the exact same thing would happen with the banking system. Now, going back to your question, why would gold or Bitcoin, why would, if you had a set like, okay, 50% reserve requirement or full reserve, now you got problems. Because it is true, you would reduce the boom bust cycle. There is absolutely no doubt about that. You would have far fewer busts, for sure. But you would have, instead of funding both of these businesses, at certain times, you would only be able to fund one. And at other times, the interest rate might be so high, the hurdle rate, that the one couldn't afford it, even though it was a very viable business. You see? And then the pushback there from the Bitcoin maxis and the Austrians who like full reserve is like, oh, well, you don't need more money because you can just use fractions of the currency units that you already have. Therefore, the money supply doesn't have to grow. It's just the money supply gains value. So initially, maybe this company needed 1 million. This company needed 1 million. Let's just assume, right? But in the world of full reserve, well, then prices would always be going down. Therefore, when these companies go back to the bank, to buy the same amount of goods and services, or to buy the same machines, instead of each company needing 1 million, now each company would only need 500,000. So now you don't have to choose which company gets the business because the price of the stuff they need has gone down. That's the argument. But what that argument fails to realize is, how are the prices going to go down? Well, George, we're just going to create more stuff. Really? How are you going to create that a lot more stuff where the prices will go down if they don't have access to capital? Or they have access to capital, the hurdle rate at 20%. You see? It's a paradox that most people, and when I mean most people, I mean 99.999% of people, even on Twitter, FinTwit, they just haven't thought that one through. Haven't thought it through. They just need a whiteboard. But anyway, that's why having a global reserve currency that's backed by gold or Bitcoin would be tough. Would be very tough. You know, another thing that most people don't think about is they think that if you were to back the dollar or whatever by gold or Bitcoin, that you would never have inflation. That's utter nonsense. Nonsense. Because just bear with me here. I think this thought experiment's important for you guys because very few people understand this. I think very few people even thought about it. But let's just say that you only have 21 million Bitcoin, or you only have X amount of gold. Let's just say that the amount of gold that we have in the world today just stopped. You couldn't create any more. Okay, fine. Well, let's just think through what would happen. So you've got an economy like the United States that is a massive importer. So we have a trade deficit. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that the countries that trade with us, they have a trade surplus. So let's just say that we are all transacting in Bitcoin. All right. What's going to happen with the country that exports the most, that has the largest trade surplus? They're going to get the most Bitcoin. So what's going to happen to their money supply? It's going to go up. I don't care if there's only 21 million Bitcoin. If one country has 1 million last year, and this year they have 20 million out of the 21 million, what do you think is going to happen to the price of stuff denominated in Bitcoin in their local country? The prices are going to skyrocket. Nobody thinks of this. Nobody thinks of that. So they think that if we just had a limited money supply, that just solves all problems, that we're never going to have inflation ever, ever, ever again. It's nonsense. That's why you go back to throughout history. And let me give you one example here. There was this African king, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was the first African king to become a Muslim, or to convert to Islam, right? And I can't remember what year. It was maybe 1000 AD or something like that. So he converts to Islam, right? And this king was very well known for being incredibly rich and having just an epic epic amount of gold. Not fiat currency. No. Gold. Not even pieces of paper. So when this king converted to Islam, the first thing that he did is he set up this tour to Mecca. But from wherever he was to Mecca was like a 6-week trip or 3-month, 4-month trip, something like that. So what he did to be a good Samaritan is he had like 10,000 people go with him, and he had like 5,000 camels or something like that. I'm not getting the numbers right, but this is just as an example, right? And I remember he put 300 pounds of gold on every single camel. And as he made his way to Mecca, he stopped pretty much at every town along the way. And what he did for all the poor and, the people, he gave them all gold coins because he wanted to be a good Samaritan. So in these little towns, as he made his way to Mecca, what happened to the money supply? The money supply skyrocketed in each one of these towns. And then he goes to Mecca to do his praying or bowing or whatever they do there for the week or 2 weeks. And as he makes his way back, he stops at each one of these towns. But each one of these towns, he comes back and they've been completely decimated by hyperinflation because of all the gold coins that he gave out on his way to Mecca. And he felt so bad about it that he's like, but he knew he had to reduce the money supply. He just didn't think about it prior. He thought he was being a do-gooder. In fact, he's like today's politicians, right? They think that they're a do-gooder, or these are the ones that aren't evil. They think they're doing good, but they don't realize that the results are going to have the opposite effect of the actual intentions, right? So it's the same thing. So he goes back through every one of these towns and he realizes what he had done. He's like, holy cow, I just doubled the money supply overnight. So then what he did is he borrowed back like almost all of them. Anyone who would lend him money, he borrowed it back at like 2% interest to reduce the money supply, to bring down the hyperinflation that he created on his way to Mecca. Moral of the story: I don't care whether you're using Bitcoin. I don't care whether you're using gold. I don't care whether you're using silver or seashells. The problem is not the money. The problem is that the money is controlled by imperfect human beings that live in an imperfect world. And as I always said to the Bitcoiners, perfect money, i.e. Bitcoin or gold, that is owned by imperfect human beings is always going to behave imperfectly. Bitcoin doesn't fix human beings. Gold doesn't fix human beings. It's not going to change our hardwiring. You see, our hardwiring is the problem. The problem is not the money. And I don't care how much of a fanatic you are on Bitcoin. If we went on a Bitcoin standard or even a gold standard, I mean, it might work well for a few years. I give it maybe 5 until we have a war, or we have something. And what are they going to do? They're going to say, oh my gosh, this limited money supply, we got to do something. Let's go ahead and create paper claims on the 21 million Bitcoin. Next thing you got 42 million. Bam. Next thing you got 100 million. And then we're off to the races. Look at this. I don't want to go off in too much of a tangent here, but guys, I think this is very important, right? Look at the crypto space, what it's become. Remember when crypto first started, or we'll use Bitcoin as a proxy there. What was the whole argument? Oh, we've got this terrible financial system. The whole economy is over financialized. We've got all these derivatives. Look at what happened to Lehman Brothers. The banking system is fragile. We've got this Eurodollar system that is reserveless. They've got no constraints on their balance sheets whatsoever. So political greed and all these banksters, they can just decimate the middle class and the poor by creating this inflation and all these extra currency units, right? That was the argument. So now we need sound money. We need sound money that they can't control. We need decentralized money so we can get rid of all this excess financialization. Because if they couldn't create the money out of thin air, then they couldn't financialize the economy. Then you have, like, let's say 2021, you have the rise of the crypto ecosystem. And what's the first thing they do? They create crypto derivatives. They create Bitcoin derivatives. And if you guys follow me on Twitter, I'm sure you remember me tweeting about this. And I would have arguments back and forth with these people. And they'd say, oh, George, you don't understand. This is amazing. Now we can do these wraps around Bitcoin, and we can lend it over here, and we can rehypothecate it over here. And then I remember another podcast host that I was on their podcast. And they're telling me how great this new technology was because it allowed you to extract equity from your house in whatever unit you wanted to. So let's just say you ran out of money at the end of the month and you needed an extra $100. You could just immediately extract that equity through some sort of smart contract or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And my rebuttal was, yeah, okay. I mean, that's cool, but is the problem with our economy that we don't have enough credit? Like, is the problem with our economy that the financialization just isn't efficient enough? What are we talking about here, guys? No, we need less financialization. We need less leverage. We need less consumption. We need more productivity. We need more work. And then they just completely went off the deep end. It's like the whole pitch at the beginning was less financialization. And then 6 months into it, the whole pitch is that we're creating even more financialization than we had before. Woo! Yay! Let's get on board. All nonsense. But why did that happen? Was it a flaw of Bitcoin? No. It was that Bitcoin, let's call it a perfect money, was owned and managed by imperfect human beings. At the end of the day, that's the problem. And gold, Bitcoin, silver, it doesn't solve that problem. Now, I do think that it could be superior, and I do think it would make it better for 5, 10, maybe 15 years. But inevitably, no matter what you use as base money, even if we have a full reserve system, we're going to be right back where we are today. It's just a matter of time.